All right. Okay, folks, this is Terry and Tom, and we're here with another exciting episode of the Metaphysical Mysteries, the most exciting part of your day, of course. And we have with us a guest today, Angelina M. And she's, she's been from everywhere. I mean, she's, technically Cambodian, American, from the Boston area, now Sedona. Wow. So she can actually talk to Tom. For those of you who know Tommy, he is, of course, from the Boston area, and she is too. And to see a beautiful Cambodian lady with a Boston accent when she gets pissed, that is funny to me. And and so those two here are going to be able to chit-chat quite well, I am sure. So we go, how do we classify Angelina? Well, I personally would say she is a psychic medium, but it's more than that, because she gets great detailed messages, and it's from the other side. It's like some of those trans mediums that we see that are getting things from, some consciousness, group consciousness on the other side. She gets that. She gets it for people all over the United States as need be. And, people come bebopping through. She's got 4 kids, beautiful kids, and they've all got unique skill sets. And to the point where she's actually went to school to learn how to help assess these kids. And many of us in the metaphysical field, where they come up with these names, I don't know, but they call them indigo kids. Some call them crystal kids and the golden kids. I don't know. Whatever name it is, it just means they're more in tune psychically than the average person. And so, Angelina, welcome to the Metaphysical Mysteries. And if you want to do any kind of a basic intro of yourself, hey, now's the time. Knock your socks off.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, thank you for having me here, Tom and Terry.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
So you want to give anybody your background?
Growing up, my mom had thought, what I experienced was what she experienced, and so she thought everything was normal, that what she experienced and what she experienced in her country. We came from Cambodia. I came to this country when I was 3 or 4 years old. And, my mom had told me stories growing up, and I never really asked or try to figure out what is real and what is not. But my mom would say, oh yeah, that's normal what you're experiencing. Today and age, we would say that's psychic abilities or mediumship. And but back then I didn't understand that, and my mom didn't understand it either, but she thought that was very normal. So coming here to the United States, when you talk to other people, you thought they experienced the same things. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to go into a little bit about the story my mom had before we came to America.
Sure, absolutely. Keeping in mind, your mom comes from correct me if I'm wrong, but a Buddhist background, from a religious point of view, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's she didn't heavily dive into the Buddhist beliefs, but she did respect it, and she knew that was her culture. So yes, she did pray to Buddha or whoever was connected with all of that, and she found some answers. And I believe that as long as you connect, with that other higher realm, that no matter what religion you are, you will get answers.
Sure. Well, go ahead. Tell us about your mom. Fascinating.
Yeah, so there's a story, and it's true. Now that I'm older, I can question her about it. So I was around 3 years old, and I have an older sister who's 3 years older than me. And we were going through the killing fields. If you ever saw the movie Killing Fields, that's the movie to watch to see what my family went through. And my mom says, that's only 25% of what really happened. what they showed in that movie. Or there's another one that Angelina Jolie produced. It was First They Killed My Father. So that is another one. The Killing Fields for me was.
This is all during like the Pol Pot period, right?
Yes, the Khmer regime, the Pol Pot period.
Yeah, Khmer Rouge, all that stuff. So for our listeners, you know, I mean, you're going back in time here, but there was millions of people. I mean, it's almost like a miniature, not even miniature, but almost like a Holocaust in and of itself that took place in that whole area. And so this was a big, big deal, not just a few hundred people. This is a big deal.
Yeah, basically, yeah, it was like a genocide almost
Right.
of very innocent people. And then they would be brainwashed to kill their own people. Yeah, it was a tough time. Everybody was drawn out away from the city and into the country or the jungle, or whatever you want to call it. And my family, my mom's first husband was killed because he was very educated, and he was tricked into going to a nearby village, and he never came back. They came back for my mom. They beat her, and she was pregnant. And they beat her, put her in a rice bag, threw in the river, and she said wherever she ended up, it did not even look familiar at all. And she didn't know how she survived that, but she lost the baby. She basically bled herself to the point where she didn't even, it took a while for her to get back to it. But when my mom was a nurse during that time, and my dad was a soldier at the camps. And so that's how my mom and my dad met. Is my dad had a hand injury, and they met then. So this happened for a long time, years. It didn't happen just like 1 year. You know, it played itself out for a long time and affected a lot of lives. And so when my mom and my dad got to the point where they were out in the country, they didn't have a place to go. And we found ourselves, I guess, with a group of other families who were looking to find refuge or safety. We didn't know where to go. There were mines everywhere we stepped. So my dad and my mom kind of fought about, you know, staying with this group or not. So my dad said we should stay with this group, and my mom said no, we shouldn't stay with this group because there's crying babies, and it would just allow us to be noticed by the enemies or the people that would harm us.
So let me tell the listeners. So you guys are actually trying to find your way out of Cambodia, and you're going through areas filled with landmines that could explode and blow you to pieces at any moment. And your mom and dad are trying to decide what group they're going to go with. And he wanted to go one way, she wanted to go to the other, and she was apparently listening to her intuition to know which way to go. Is that pretty much correct?
Yes, basically, if that's how we would say it now is, yeah, she listened to that inner ability, right? So maybe she was using her psychic, I don't know if you want to call it that, but she was using that ability. And there are other stories too that go along with that, where she got out of trouble, a lot of trouble. And she knew when was the right time to move away from that trouble or, bad situation. So when we were with this group, my mom had this very deep desire to leave the group. My dad didn't. And so one day she found a Buddha head, and she kind of tucked it in her, pants. And she prayed that night because we lost all hope. We were all hungry. There was no food. And my mom was worried, so she prayed, and I think it came from the heart. And I think that's what you really need when you connect with the other side, is when you pray from the heart and you know what you want to do in the mind, and you connect those two together, you will get that answer to your prayer. So I think that's where my mom found her answer to her prayer. And that night she asked, how do I get my family to safety? What do I do? Where do I go? So that was left, on the open. And she started as praying to God. She didn't know who she was praying to, but she said, I just prayed. So that night, as soon as she fell asleep, she saw an old man In her dream, he had a cane. He came by her. And mind you, we were sleeping on the ground where all the leaves are and the insects. So he came over in her dream, hit her leg and said, "Hey, little lady, when you wake up, wherever your feet points, follow that path." And as soon as you follow the path, he kind of made it a riddle for her to understand, but it's hard for me to translate into English. So basically, she said, follow the direction wherever your foot points to when you wake up, and you have to do this before sunrise. Then you follow the path, you'll hear running water. When you hear running water, you keep going till you hear a baby cry. When you hear the baby cry, walk towards the direction of the baby. However, do not touch the baby, do not pick up the baby under any circumstance. Leave the baby there. And then he said, you'll continue to follow the path and you'll see a large hill or little mountain. And he said, you want to climb that little mountain or hill. And he said, you'll hear commotion as you get towards the top of the mountain. And when you hear that commotion, you will see, when you get to the very top, what direction you need to look in to find safety.
Okay, I want to stop.
And so
I'll stop you for just a second. I want to point out, you mentioned something really important about the prayer work, and it said connecting the head and the heart together. Now, people like Braden, who's obviously really well known in the metaphysical world, I've written lots of books, speaks on stage. He's done a lot of research, and he especially went into the Eastern cultures to look at the ancient texts about that. And he speaks of connecting the head with the heart, and there's parts of the heart that are like a brain, almost a small miniature brain. And if you connect those two together, that's when the miracles happen, so to speak. The real stuff happens. And I think, Tommy, in your work too, that's very similar energetics. So what she was doing in a natural sense, science-wise, we know that is how you manifest things.
At this point, they've proven the heart has its own sense of intelligence. And in fact, a lot of times the heart will have information that can process it faster or sooner rather than your brain does. And that's part of the intuitive abilities. So when they are in what they call coherence, when they're in sync, the heart and the head, then things start to flow very well for people.
So your mama was doing that just perfect. And so she was able to then follow. So, okay, you're getting into the top of the hill. So I'm interested. Go ahead.
So as soon as she wakes up, she, tells my dad, we're leaving. There's no and ifs or buts. You're not arguing with me. We're leaving right now, and just us. So they leave. My mom said whatever happened with that dream, she said she was all in it, because it's either do it now or she'll never find the answers, right? So she does. She said everything that happened, everything that he said that needs to happen, happened. And she said to the T. There was nothing different, nothing changed. Everything that he said. And so when she got up to that mountain, she said she had to look because there was some trees in the way, but she said she had to look. And when she looked downwards, she saw like a white Red Cross camp. So that was basically the border of Thailand. And so my mom dropped to her knees and she told my dad, I couldn't tell you this, but I just know we needed to move quickly and make less noise. But she eventually told him. And I mean, he had to believe her because of what happened, and so.
You guys did hear the baby too, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So the baby was there, and my mom said, oh, I felt so bad. I wanted to pick up the baby. And then I heard the voice again, remember, do not touch the baby. Yeah. So I didn't know if that was like a trap or that would have lagged our time, or the baby would have cried even louder, or whatever, for whatever reason, we were not allowed to touch that baby. So, and good thing she didn't, because we found ourselves to safety. And, my mom says it to this day, like, how do you explain that? And so, for someone who wouldn't believe it, who've never experienced it, it's hard to believe. But for her, she knew that she was, watched over, and that her prayer was answered.
Right. Absolutely. And so then you guys, from that point, you made your way to America?
Yes. So my aunt, we kind of reached out and they asked, "Do you have any family members in the U.S.?" And my aunt sponsored us and tried to get us over there. So by the time we came to the United States, we had nothing but the clothes on our backs, and we had all, mind you, in Cambodia, it's very hot. So we had very light clothing. And so when we came to the United States, it was winter. And boy, it was like a shocker, literally.
Literally. So the guy who came and bumped her, did she ever figure out who that was?
She said that she never dreamt about him, or she's never heard his voice ever again. And when I asked her, she says, "Oh, I think it's associated with the Buddha head that she found."
Mm-hmm.
So she believes that in connection to that Buddha head, that there is maybe something that was connected to it, where she was almost like a conduit.
Right. Gotcha. So you get to America, and I guess I want to kind of skip ahead a little bit to with related to your children and what you started to see as they were growing up. That and we often talk about these abilities kind of run down through the generations. I mean, you hear gypsies 8 generations down. You hear of people that have my grandma, my great grandma, my grandpa. They all did it. Now I do it. And so obviously it makes sense, since you do it, your mother did it, and you even told me a story one time about it was a great grandfather, I believe, that then did some really interesting stuff too. So that's fascinating. But go ahead.
Yeah. So and I didn't hear this until I got older, or maybe I just didn't remember it. But my mom said, "Oh, I've been telling you guys since you were young." And then my sister actually brought this up to my attention, and my sister does not believe in any of this medium. She doesn't want to believe it. I mean, she's had some experiences, but she's like, "Nope, I don't want to see them. I don't want to hear them." But she had one experience where it kind of riled her, and she had to ask me about it. And then that was brought up about my grandfather, because I think she realized that it's more than what she can explain to me. And then when she brought up my grandfather, she goes, "Oh, ask Mom. You need to ask Mom, because she knows the story." And I heard it when I was younger, and I think maybe she knew that I forgot about it, but I did hear it faintly, but not entirely the story. So when I asked my mom finally as an adult, I said, "Mom, I'm going through these weird things. My sister said that you had something in the family, or Dad had someone in the family where they had abilities, where it's like a fairy tale story. You wouldn't believe it." And she goes, "Oh yeah, it's true. But when she tells me these stories, it's like one of those, grandma, she sits on the porch and she tells you these stories, and that deep down that she knows it to be true. And you can feel it when she tells you the stories." And so the story goes that my great grandfather had the ability to somehow stop or manipulate time. And when I go into what I do now, like, I realize that we perceive time, but whereas the other side, it doesn't seem like there's time. Like, I can project myself and say, what will happen tomorrow? And I could already see what happened tomorrow. So now that I'm older and I see this, I want to question it, because I've experienced it. So when I asked my mom about, this relative, this ancestor, she says there was this one story where he had a package to be delivered very far away, and the package has already been on its way, And he says, oh no, I'm not ready to give the package yet. I need the package back. So my mom said it took him literally 5 minutes to retrieve the package. And so in our culture, I don't know what you want to call it, but they do a chant and they go back or they go forward in time. So my mom said that is what he did. He did a chant, and you somehow reverse that. And my mom said in 5 minutes, he was able to retrieve the package that was nowhere in the village and come back with it. And says, yeah, of course I can do this. Just naturally.
Yeah, matter of fact. Yeah. So
Yeah.
now, so that would be time travel for all practical purposes. What we would call time travel.
Yeah. And so my mom didn't explain it as that. She just said, yeah, he did his chant, and he took the item back or whatever in 5 minutes.
And so this other village or wherever it was, that was like 30, 40 miles away, or?
Yeah, it had to be in the city. They would have to go through the city, and we were in the country. So that would have been a few hours.
Wow.
Well over a few hours.
If he was going to walk it.
And he didn't have a car. And yeah, there was no way. There was no train for him to get there. And if you think about it, 5 minutes, it probably got him down the street.
Right.
Right. So, and they confirmed that they already got the package in the city or wherever it was. So my mom said, yeah, there's truth to that, and that it was already sent to the city or closer to the city in comparison to where they were. And, how did he do the chant to get his body moving fast enough to get there in 5 minutes and back?
Yeah, it's all vibration, isn't it? And so you get that vibration going fast enough, you can go either way, I suppose. It'd be interesting to take modern day scientists and really apply some quantum physics to that to see what would it have taken. Of course, Einstein and talks about that, with time and light and all that, and whether how that's all interconnected. So it appears as though your great grandfather tapped into something through a natural source, not necessarily a mechanical source, in order to access that, assuming the story is true. We have no reason to disbelieve it, but it is fantastical in the sense of the standard American culture that would even be plausible to talk about.
Yeah. So the other thing is, he was not only did he have that ability to travel that distance or that time, but he was also able to heal. So there's a story about a young girl that comes in, a young woman, I should say, that comes in, and her family's desperate to the point where they said they've spent a lot of money trying to get her well, but they don't know what to do and how to get her well. And she's very young, and they wanted to try everything. They were willing to try everything. And so they went to a village where my grandfather was, and they said, if you heal our daughter, we will give you our daughter in a hand of marriage. So I think that kind of boosted him, and he wanted, he was like, oh, that's great, So he, I think he really wanted that. And so he healed her and he married her. I mean, that's no more than I can say, but my mom said that he was able to do that instantly. It wasn't like he had to heal her over a course of time. It was right there and right then. The family never came back. Like, it was that moment. And so they arranged the marriage, and I never really knew what happened, with the family, what happened or how many kids they had. It was just so long ago, but.
Wow, that's cool. Well, that's time too. We always talk about healing is based on time. We have a regular time set. You cut your arm, It's going to take a couple of weeks for that to all, scab over and heal. But what if you could accelerate that to where, like the Jesus stuff, somebody had, that kind of stuff, you'd lay hands on there, and what are you doing? You're basically, it appears, doing almost a photonic transference of light at a much faster vibration, which is effectively related to time, in an intelligent way, to move from now until what your head and your heart see is already done. And if you can get your head and heart to see what's already done, snap, it'll happen so much quicker. And I think that's what you're kind of describing. So let me jump. That's cool. I mean, I really like that. But let me jump to your indigo kids. Tell me, how old were some of these kids when you started to first see some of these cool things? And then, once again, what would you recommend to other parents if they start seeing some of these interesting things?
Okay, so because I had these experiences myself, growing up as a child, like, you just think, oh, you see, you just have imaginary friends, you see the monsters in the closet, it's all kid stuff, right? So that's the way that Americans or most people would perceive that. So because I grew up with, the ability to see things, or I saw things and I couldn't explain it, and then I would tell my mom, and she goes, oh yeah, that's normal. I didn't know at the time that wasn't normal, right? Or that was something that not everybody spoke about or was open to. So because I experienced that, it led me to now, when I have kids now, it led me to be more open, right? And to think, like, what can I do to help my own children? Because my mom she was great with saying, okay, that's normal, and that's that. And that's better than saying, that's made up stuff and don't believe it. And, so I kind of, it was given to me as a positive thing that my mom kind of said, oh, that's normal, and that's okay, to experience those things. But now growing up and having my own children, and now that they're, older now, and I see that they're telling me they see things. And, my husband was, he was raised, Catholic. He doesn't follow the Catholic, religion anymore. But, for me to be married to him and having, he's Italian Irish, so they don't, the Western culture is like, what, you just don't understand, you're not on the same page. And so for him to go along and see with me, and to, to see with our own kids, it's just, it proves that there is more than what we can explain. And then how do we help the children? And I believe, like, you have to help the children because we are the children in the future, right? So like in my culture, we believe in reincarnation, or that you live multiple lives, thousands or hundreds of thousands of lives, right? So if we don't help our children, or we don't help ourselves in this life, then 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, as we evolve, how can they hold that energy? How can they identify themselves? How can they know who they truly are? As spiritual beings, we have that capability. And so that led me to kind of venture out. And great thing, we have the internet where you can, look at everything up. And originally I was skeptical about looking at teaching children how to read blindfolded. And then I said, you know what? Everything that I went through, like, I need to see this, because I said I know it's possible that you are able to use an inner vision, right? Because I do it without knowing it. So I know that there's more to that. And, I kind of wanted to learn, because my children are seeing things, and how do I help them kind of navigate through that? I can only show them what I've learned, but I want to also look into what the world has already learned, or where they got their information from and how to tap into certain things, right?
So I'm gonna stop you and just tell people what she's going to tell you. It's going to be one of her children. She's actually blindfolded them and then let them read a book. And so that sounds like magic, to the onlooker. How the hell do you do that? And of course, obviously, it's using the third eye, your inner vision, if you will, your mind's eye. It's called a lot of different things, but it's a focus of your mental acuity, looking beyond the physical to see what's necessary. I mean, I knew a guy who would, and I wouldn't recommend this ever, but would be blindfolded and could drive a car. It's the same concept. Books are much less dangerous. Don't do the car thing. That's just, from us here at the Metaphysical Mysteries, we do not endorse driving a car blindfolded. But if you want to try it with a book, that's a whole nother thing. And where I hear this often is the people who are intuitives, and they start to, as they're reading a book, they start to get the next page before they ever turn it. And that's how I've seen people learn it. They're going through and they're reading, and they also are already basically at the next page. So when they flip it, it's like they've already got it, and they're at the next page. And so I don't know how it came up with your indigo child, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So going into it, all of my children were like, "Oh, Mom, like we're gonna be made fun of, and my friends will never believe me." And they were more concerned about what society thought, and I think that's hard for kids.
Sure.
Like, going into it, they kind of just say, "Well, this is not normal, and I can't be this way because my friends are not this way," So going into it, they were not fully, saying, "Yeah, like I want to do that." Right? They were interested, but they thought more about, I think, some of the issues that they would have going down the road. So when I first taught the children, my husband was very negative about it. And he would just come in with this energy like, "Why are you teaching the children that?" And I'm sure in different religions, especially if, like the Catholic religion that he grew up in, that was seen as like a bad thing. What are you doing? That's not normal, and you can't do that. And what are you opening the kids up to? And so I think that was his mentality, because that was put into his head as a growing up. So he came in just very negative, and I think that's one of the things that is not allowed, is you cannot have a teacher or the people around you be negative, because they can feel that, and it shuts them completely. If they are not 100%, confident, it will just close for them. Until they find that safety again, until they find confidence again. And so when I did it with my 3 kids at the beginning, my husband was in the house, and I said, "Oh geez," and they didn't get it. They got the colors, but they didn't get the reading. And I said, "Oh, maybe that's different, because all the kids going into it, they will have their own different experiences." So then I tried it on my youngest daughter, and when I tried it on her, I took her outside away from the commotion of the house, and my husband was at work, so she couldn't have that negative influence.
Right.
So when I took her outside, I put the covering on her, and this covering is, you can't see light even when you're outside. You cannot see any daylight. It's completely dark. And once you've tried, a lot of people, say, "Oh, I'm sure they can see through it." No, there's no way that they can see through it at all once it's covered. And then, so, I have her do it, I have her read, and she's reading the book, right? And I go, gosh, it's like when we're in that space, when she's in that space and there's no influence, she can get there, right? Because she's not thinking, "Oh, this is not real," or this is not this, how are people going to think about me? Oh, how does Dad feel about all of this? And then my husband came home, and I was still outside, and he walked out and he goes, "Oh, like, what are you guys doing?" And I'm like, I need you to look, because I got her to read. And I said, I want to show you, this is very possible. And she's reading it, and he whispers in my ear, and he says, well, maybe she's peeking. And I just looked at him, and I took a big cardboard piece of white paper, and I put it under her, from the chest all the way out, so it covers the book. So if she was cheating, there's no way, there's no gap in between her body and the book for her to look down through the the blindfold and see the words or the colors. So I did that. I put it over her, and I said, okay, continue to read. And she continued to read, 2 sentences. And I said, and I looked at him and I said, how do you explain that?
Mm-hmm.
So, from that point on, seeing that, and even the energy of those around us, it makes a big difference. How do you identify in using your third eye or your psychic abilities or mediumship, even the influences of those around you, has an impact, because as a teacher, I believe that we are like the conduits for them. Mm-hmm. So, you can teach a child, and Tom can teach a child, and I can teach a child. Let's say we clone that child. That child could have, in my opinion, those influences could be different. So they might pick up on Tom. Tom might has an ability to know, right? So they might pick up an ability to know, like, oh, I don't see any color, but I know that looks like an animal. All right, so if you gave him a book that, I'm just using this as an example, and Terry, you might so do something different where like the child's eye, and this is what I actually experienced. A kid had an eye, and it was red. I guess it was irritated, and I saw him. He, did the blindfold. After he left, I didn't know that his eye was red, like under. I guess it was under the eye, until you picked up the under eyelid. And when his father came to pick him up, he goes, "Oh wait, let me see your eye. Your eye's not bothering you anymore. It was no longer red." Right. So Terry, you might have this child, and the father, and this actually happened to me, where I'm using this as an example because I know it to be true. I experienced it. Terry, you might have this child, and the father didn't think anything about it. He didn't say, "Oh yeah, you helped this child." He didn't even think about that, right? But when we do it, we're like, "Oh my gosh, this happened." Looking back at it. So you helped heal this child's eye, even though he couldn't read the books or he couldn't see any of the colors. But something happened during that time period at, being a conduit for them, right? So then I, as a different teacher, might have a different experience where I can help the child open that eye so that they can read that book or see the colors. So because I believe that, we are conduits, and we use the, energies around us to help the children at the time, it's like so important. And I think like the group that you have, it's like you can tap into different children. If they're not showing it at first, it's okay. It's like you're not going to have that child that plays baseball or basketball perfectly. They kind of work into it, and then sometimes in that year they'll be so much better, or they'll make improvements. So I think like with helping children, it's the same way. You have to kind of mold them into saying, okay, are you an artist? Are you an athlete? Where are you? And try to find their ability. And I think that's so important, because for me, I can't be the same medium as another medium. We use our abilities differently, and I would have to meditate, and I'll actually hear the words like as if I'm talking on the phone. And I need that sometimes. I need that clarification to give another loved one the answers, or to clarify, hey, listen, I am speaking to your child who's passed, and how do you do that? Yeah, so to give that exact word in your head and then relay the message is important to me.
Sure.
And I don't like to just feel it. I like to hear it.
I will say that obviously all three of us have been to many conferences. through the years, and you notice that when you're with like-minded people, the energy that, synergizes, that those that have psychic abilities, it is massively enhanced when you are with a group of, say, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 other people who are building that energy in the zone that you're in, so that you are able to, almost instantaneously access the other side, where it might take you time to sit and meditate if you're by yourself, to try to draw in that energy. But when you've got all these people around you, you feed off of that, and it's synergistic. So everybody's getting more than they normally would get if they were by themselves. And that energy is a healing energy because it's a love energy. It's a communicatory type energy also, and interpretive energy. And there's so much to it that I really think people need to understand that. And when you're talking about the children, not every teacher is meant for every student. And you have to find that match that's just so. And finding that mentor, and all three of us have talked about finding mentors for these people, these young folks. What a waste it would be, what a God's gift to waste if we didn't, as adults and mentors, try to help these folks learn to use these gifts for themselves, for their families, and more importantly, for mankind as a whole. We don't know what the future holds, where it might be imperative to the future of mankind at some point that we have a certain number of psychic mediums that can tap in and give us truth that we can't get anywhere else. And I think we really, really would be doing a disservice if we just said, poo-poo, it's just a kid stuff. It's not real. So taking it seriously, can you make some games out of it where they learn? Of course. Can you make it fun? Of course. It doesn't have to be deadly serious. But even in the ancient days, and I'll go back into the Judeo-Christian world, and they talk about prophets, that are written in the Bible and stuff. And of course, they're in the Vedas and they're in other, Buddhist texts and so forth. These kids were identified young, and that's what people don't realize. They were identified by their parents and grandparents, and then handed over to the rabbi to go to mystery schools, schools for prophets. So by the time they're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, they've literally been trained to tune in to the other side and give these grandiose commandments, if you will, scripts that we use right now. And I think really we're at that stage where we really need to take advantage of what we do know so that the children don't get wasted. And how many years, take 20, 30, 40 years ago, growing up in the wrong religion would be the death knell to all this. Absolutely don't talk about it. And you'll find the great grandmother who did maybe grow up Catholic, which, since we mentioned that, it could be anything, who had abilities but would never ever say it. They might do some things, and grandma knows. Just ask grandma if you're going to have a baby boy or baby girl. She'll tell you, and who you're going to marry. Grandma will know. And, because even further back, we called it witchcraft, because we didn't understand it. And some of the dogma of certain religions scared the bejesus out of people, is what I call it. And so now I think the science of it all, and Tom, chime in here with the science on this if you would, but I think that's going to help us get past this.
Yeah, the science is starting to catch up with the quote unquote the woo-woo stuff. It's taken a little while, but people are starting to realize there is an intersection between the two. Angie, if you don't mind, I just want to take you back for a moment. Some things you said earlier that I think would really help the listeners. You mentioned how your mother gave you support as you were having different experiences. And I know there's parents out there and maybe people themselves that have had some experiences. How young were you when you first started noticing in yourself and in your kids these gifts? And what were they? What was it what was showing up that you went, I've got something here?
Okay, yeah. So for me, it was seeing people, and I thought, oh, people talk about your imaginary friend. So if you go to school, if your friends say, oh, you have an imaginary friend too, or the monsters in the closet, the people walking around in the middle of the night. So I would experience things like that as a child because I think I was more afraid of it. So therefore, it came. Because you don't want to see things at night and especially sleeping alone, So growing up, I had to sleep the nightlight and I still do, only because I still see them. So, those things when your child say, Mom, can you keep the light on? Those little things like your child, your child doesn't think about it, but you have to pick up on these things, right? So those are the things that I went through. And then now my kids are the same way where they're like, oh, can you leave the light on? Or there's one story where I'll tell you this with my oldest daughter. She was 3 years old. We were living in Massachusetts during this time, so in Massachusetts, and the house is very. It's in the historical society. The pictures are in the historic society. It's old, and we moved into this house. It was the first house, and one night my husband and I were downstairs watching TV, and our oldest daughter, she slept in the room with our oldest son. They had different beds, and there's a closet at the end of her bed. And one night she screamed, and it was a different scream. It wasn't like, oh, there's a bug or something. It was a different type of scream. And so we both ran up. My husband didn't even stay on the couch because of the disturbing scream that he ran up the stairs behind me. And we opened the door, we turned on the light, and we were like, what's wrong? And she's like, there's a monster in my closet. And so my husband looked at me and, he walked to the closet. I hold her and then my husband's like, come on, let's go to the closet, So I pick her up, I'm holding her, and my husband opens the closet door and we say to her, is he in there? Is he still in there? And she goes, oh, he's hiding, and then I knew at that point that I needed to communicate with something that was scaring her. So I said into my head and I sent it out to whatever that was there. And I said, whatever space you're in, you're not welcome here. If you continue to scare my child, I will not, I will not help you in what you need help in because you're still scaring my child. If you need to come to me, and ask me for any help, then come to me. Do not, interfere with my child and scare her that way, because clearly it did something. And I asked her what it did, and it said it made funny faces at me to get me to scream and be scared and go under my blanket. And so as soon as I sent this message to it, my daughter looks at me and she says, Mommy, he said he knows. And I said this in my head. I did not say it out loud. And my husband was there to witness all of it. And after I told him what I said to it in my head, telepathically, and then my daughter responding because she could hear it talking, she responded and told me, she says, yeah, Mom, he basically telling me he already knows that I can't help him if, he continues this. So, that day forward, I said, oh, wow, like they're starting to voice these experiences now that I can, they're old enough to tell me and they're old enough to express them. So this is when I kind of like really dive deeper and try to understand what I was going through for them and what they, needed to learn from me.
Right.
So as a mom, how did you decide this was real and she didn't have some other kind of issues that needed to be addressed, maybe with a clinician?
Yeah, I mean, you know what, for a while, at first I thought I was going crazy, and it started to get really strong after I had the kids, to the point where I told my husband, I said, I can't, I hear voices, and now that I have kids, why is this happening to me now while I have kids? Why couldn't it happen, why couldn't this be more strange before I had kids? Because I was more worried, because if they're stronger and they're affecting my everyday life, I thought I was going crazy. And so, so to that point, I seeked for some help. I saw like a psychotherapist and I said, I think I'm going crazy. And the guy's like, no, you're not going crazy, because crazy people don't know they're going crazy. So, you know, I just went down a road, and it led me dive more into the spiritual aspect. And then I realized, you know, there are mediums, there's psychic abilities, there's all of these things that are labeled that, you know, we don't really think about because we're busy working, and we're too busy thinking about the material things in life. So when my daughter had this first incident with the monster in the closet, I knew with my husband standing there that I wasn't going crazy. I knew that I already communicated that message to it, and she relayed it back to me. And that was enough evidence for me to go forward and say, there's more than we can explain. Like, how does anybody explain that, you know? But as the kids got older, they still continued to see these things, right? And they, like, my son was like, one day we had a party in the out structure, and he goes, "Oh, Auntie's here." And my brother looks out the window and he goes, "No, the car's not here yet." As soon as he says the car's not here yet, my sister rolls up in the front, you know? So those experiences, you know, my youngest son, he has the ability to, you know, tap into that time, I think, looking at, okay, she's going to be here right now. She's down the street and she's coming up the way. And he did this at 2 years old. You know, so
what
things like that.
you are describing, just for our listeners, I mean, you're describing clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, which you have. You are also describing clairaudience, which is clear hearing, that you can hear an entity. Your daughter's hearing that, and your son's talking about premonitions. So a precognition is another. And each one of these clairs, which I would encourage people to look up the different points of clairvoyance, you know, because there's clair for taste, there's clair for smell. All of a sudden you start smelling your grandfather's pipe. They're using all 5 of your senses to tune you in to what's going on around you that you maybe physically can't see, but using the third eye system, you can. And I'll chime in and say, you know, both my kids, same way. They have abilities, you know, that there's no question about it. And you know that you've had at least my daughter show up at your house a time or two, and my son, you know, he's obviously been able to do a lot of these things since he was a little tyke, you know, 3 years old. And for kids seeing shadow people, it's scary for them, apparently, especially if the parents don't believe. And if you believe, you're fortunate in the sense that you had your own abilities, and your mother had her own abilities, and it kind of went down through the family. And so I think it gave you a sense of, okay, this is an option. What if it was your mother-in-law, you know, and your husband, and they totally didn't get this? You know, what would the kid turn out like if they just poo-pooed it and it's all just BS, if that's what they thought? But fortunately, they have you. And since they have you, you are their mentor. You're their help. You're the one that gives this reality to them, you know, that this is a real thing. It does really happen. And I think that's the key for a lot of parents. And if you don't have this ability yourself as a parent, then you need to reach out, seek people who do have this ability and have this desire to help the children better understand their gifts. I think that's really where we're at with this, is we want to make sure that these kids don't go through life thinking they're nuts. And some psychotherapists may say, yep, you're nuts, and you know, here's your special pill you need to take every day to calm yourself down, when in fact it may just be simple clairvoyance that's available. And we want to make sure that people know that there are others out there who can help. I mean, you're in Sedona. Well, Sedona is well known as a, you know, metaphysical mecca, if you will, in the United States. It's probably, I would say, the premier place to go for metaphysical sense of, you know, all the vortexes and things that we talk about in Sedona. There are other places. Eureka Springs, Arkansas comes to mind as that, up in New York, in Lilydale, They have a whole community of nothing but psychics and mediums. Casadega down in Florida, it's like the southern version of Lilydale. And there are others. I think some in California as well. But what I'm pointing out is that there are sources, and it doesn't have to be. And I'm trying to find a source that is not too woo-woo for the parents to swallow is really the challenge. And I think when we as practitioners, so to speak, come from a background that is legit, clinical, science-based, we don't necessarily talk to woo-woo language. I think that helps to calm down the parents that, you know, you're in good hands, and you as part of a larger speaking group that Tom and I are involved in, the STEMS group is what it's called. We do this kind of thing for parents. And so I know you got the opportunity to go to Canada and to take some courses on this. Is there anything from those courses that, you know, would be helpful for a parent to know or realize?
So yes, I went to Canada, and this is part of my, you know, seeking journey, is to see for myself, right? Because when I went online, there's a lot of people who said, no, this is fake. This is all a scam. There's no truth into it. The kids were basically told what to read. They memorized what they were, you know, seeing already on camera. So, you know, a lot of people kind of, you know, gave a lot of negativity to this. And I think a lot of parents looking into it, they say, you know, they're like, oh, it's not worth the time to even look into it, right? But for me, it was worth all the time, because I had to see it for myself, you know, even after looking at multiple things online, I wanted to see for my own eyes, you know. So, yeah, I went to Canada. It was like a 3-day course. And I think, like, at first I was like, oh yeah, you know, it just seems like things that I already know, right? It's just more pictures, and then how to explain to them, how to get them to visually tap, right? So that's what I learned, is not just through that course, but through what I've gone through, and then just reading things online to help explain what I'm going through. I think the visual aspect, so like when we connect with our heart, are we sincere? You know, connect with that heart, and then we think about it in our head, in our mind, that we can just, anybody can do it. It's just a matter of time, how, you know. So when I went to this, you know, I was like, oh, maybe, you know, I don't know if this is the right place for me. Who really knew? I didn't know, but I just knew that I wanted to learn something. But I went there and I did, and I saw that this is where I actually got that whole, you know, we're conduits, because I saw that exactly, that, you know, one teacher might teach a child something different, or they might not pick up on something, or another might, you know, instantly get them to learn something, or instantly get them to read. Some kids don't even see anything at all, or they might just see colors, or some kids are so advanced, like you said, like they'll go to the next page. You know, they'll see the colors on the next page, and then when you turn the next page, you're like, oh, there's the color that you saw. And you can't tell them that, you know, what they saw is wrong. You can never tell them no, you know, when you're teaching them, because you don't want to put that in their mind, because what we tell them to tap into is, it's so small compared to their whole environment, you know. So when I took this back to my kids, this is what I learned. I learned that, you know, they are tapping into everything. They're tapping into dad's energy. You know, they if they don't feel happy that day, you know, you just, it depends on them, you know. And so the energy of that makes a big difference, how they can astral travel instantly, and they didn't know that they could before, you know. And some kids will spend a lot of time, like my son, he spends a lot of time, he wants to go look at the world, and then he wants to go look at the planets. And
let's do a timeout, and we talk about astral travel, okay? Which is interesting, because, you know, my son does that as well. And so astral travel, for the listener, what they're really talking about is basically coming out of body, and you pretty much look the same. It's one of your 7 layers that you have, but it's the most like your physical layer. In the Bible, it talks about being attached by the silver cord. And this is where you're going in astral traveling. And there's the silver cord is really an electrical vibratory cord, an energetic cord, if you will. And they say if the silver cord is severed, you're dead. Okay. But for those who do it, when people do it when they're sleeping and they don't even know it. And sometimes if you've ever been asleep and all of a sudden somebody shakes you and says, hey, wake up. And all of a sudden you just like snap, you just like a rubber band, and you're like this, and that's the silver cord snapping your astral body back into your physical body. And so when Angelina's talking about the astral body and kids moving around, and certainly they do. Matter of fact, you told me a story about one of your kids seeing a friend of ours walking through your house in her astral body, and they were able to see her and describe her. And sure enough, she had actually visited just to check on the family, make sure everybody was okay. Now, how cool is that when you then check and sure enough, that's exactly what she was doing, and they can see that astral body. I was teaching astral travel one time, and a woman who had never done it before, all 3 of us happened to know her, but she'd never done it before, but she actually came out of body. I don't know that she realized she did, but she walked through my son. And when she did, there's a little pop that happens. And my son said, well, somebody just walked through me. And there is a little pop that occurs. It's almost a little of an electrical pop, if you will. And then she went ahead and followed my instructions where to go outside. And then she came back and popped back in the body. She felt so bad that she walked right through him in that process. So can you do it? Yes, you can. Does it sound the craziest stuff you ever can? Yes. For the listener, yeah, I totally get you're going, you guys all have had too many margaritas. It's simply, you're nuts. And I will say that is not necessarily the case. I will say also that science is catching up to that as well. And we do know we're able to even take pictures of this. And I think you provided a really good picture your son took. Do you remember this picture? It almost like a kind of a ghost picture. And that is a really good, is it an astral body? In a way, it may be more ethereal body, but nonetheless, it is a body nonetheless of a person. And that is a very cool one. I think we may have it on the website, a version of that on the website, so people can kind of see. They don't know it's you because you're, at your back. I guess I'm telling them now, but to have a 3-year-old snap that photo out of the blue and pick that up is so cool. And I think it reinforces exactly what they're seeing that you're describing, but you got it captured on camera, and now other people can learn from that,
Yeah, I think, adding to all these things that are unbelievable that are happening to my children and I, like, what are the chances, right? So one day I was getting him ready for bed. I was facing the window and I was, closing the blinds so that the street light, you can't see any street lights or any lights coming in. And he's playing with my phone and he's on the bed, and, he as he's playing with it, he's laughing. And he snaps a few pictures, and I do look back a few times, and I continued, and I look, and then I looked out the window a few times during that time, and he snapped a picture of this thing, and you can kind of see the arms and the hands. Yeah. And so that's on your website, right?
Yeah, it's on there. It is on there. Okay. Yeah, so you can take a look at that. And I think you can see the face. I think you can, if you really study it, there's a lot to that. And I think we just popped that off the old or one of the websites and put it on there. I need to put the original back on because it's clearer than what we've got right now. But yes, that's, and I think as you recall, the story goes that you were actually seeing another entity walking across the yard at the time.
Yeah, so when that happened, right before I went to go check on the camera, I looked down and looked at the window, and I could see that there was possibly a dead person, and I could see them walking. I know they weren't there, but I can see that they were there, and they were looking up almost at me, like, what is that behind you? Like, they looked up at me like, what's that? Yeah. So, then when I saw that, something made me look at the camera. Mm-hmm. So as soon as I got to him, I looked at the camera and I saw the picture, and I at first I was like, oh no, is this a negative thing or a good thing? Because why are their hands over my head? Mm-hmm. Slightly, and you can kind of see the leg or the knee. So this thing was, it looked bigger than me if I stood up. Sure. And you can see the lights coming, and the room was very dim. It was very, very dark, because you can see where I'm sitting. You can't really see my feature. You can't see the side of my face at all. You can just see my hair. And so this thing was bright enough to see the white and the layers of white that it had in it. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, he knew, because he was playing with it and he was laughing, and he was like, oh, let me take a picture of you, kind of what kids do, and then I realized that it wasn't negative, because he was happy and he was playful, and after that he went to bed and nothing bad happened. So I knew that it was a positive thing that happened and not a negative.
Right. I think the idea that the arms or hands were extended, I think that is also a way that they have a greater ability to try to communicate with you, because they're trying to wrap energy around you so they can get into your mind a little bit and give you a message. So the further they stand off, the harder it's going to be. I mean, it seems natural that you'd want to get close. But I didn't see, when I looked at it and evaluated it, I didn't see anything really negative about it. There was no dark areas. There was nothing that looked like it was menacing in any way. It almost felt like an ancestor, if you will, that was just hanging with y'all and just checking it out. And I just didn't see anything negative about it. But fascinating photo, and rare, I think. And great to teach people with. Yeah, absolutely. So, we've covered a lot of ground here. So I guess I will ask you if there's anything as we get ready to wrap up here. Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners, or any words of advice?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot to say, and I would like to say, for those parents who haven't really experienced it themselves, if they see that their child is experienced, even for a second, if your child says, oh, I saw grandpa, or I saw somebody that passed away, or they're experiencing orbs or colors, or anything that, you can't wrap your head around, then that tells you that there's something there, and maybe your child has an ability, because we're coming into this world and now where they're gonna experience it, and their abilities are gonna become more stronger. So eventually they're gonna have to face it. It's just a matter of time, when, where, right? And how it will impact them. And I believe that, during a certain time of their life, maybe they'll be more ready than others. And so, everybody's not on the same page, but, and not everybody will have to learn the spiritual side of everything. My brother doesn't experience anything at all. And he says, how do you experience all this weird stuff and I don't? But he doesn't come from that openness, so I think it's because he doesn't come from that openness, he can't receive it, because his mind is at work, and, he can't see past that. But as a child growing up, I remember watching him, and I remember him saying, oh my gosh, there's, this thing on the wall, but he couldn't identify it. Or he would see a man with a top hat by the door, so he would see things like that, but, he shut that off while he was younger. And so now he's an adult, he doesn't believe in it. He doesn't experience it. And, I know it's within the family, so you would think that he would experience it now. But, and he tells me he doesn't, but that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that he's he doesn't have the abilities or he can't tap into it. It's just a matter of, when a person needs to get into it. And I think that like a lot of people are, in this earth now that will need to experience the spiritual because, it's got to be all connected, right? So we got to evolve. So that's how I see it. We have to evolve mind, body, and soul. So now in the physical, we evolve the body, we learn about ourselves, and we learn about the challenges of life. So then that's the mental, right? And then now we're going to the spiritual, and how do you learn about, all these things you can't explain? So eventually our souls need to experience that on this earth plane, one way or the other. And yeah, we can't force that on everyone. So I think for those parents that, you see those small little moments when your child is experiencing something, you should encourage them and then seek answers, and then, try to work with your child, because it's more encouraging when they feel safe in an environment where everybody else is on the same page and positive about an experience versus, like my husband, having that negative energy of that's not possible and what are you doing and why are you doing that and that's not right, so it does make a big impact. And so for those parents, that are going, oh, should I get my kid into this? It's all up to you. And at your time, eventually, you will want to seek those answers. And so for me and my family, it's the time, it's the best time. And to especially have a husband that is not understanding and now is, listening and telling people about me, and which is weird because normally he would tell me to shut up, and not to say anything. But it's very comforting to find that energy and be in that space with others. So I hope that parents are more open to it and, invite the experiences versus saying they're just kid stuff and they're just the monsters in the closets, the imaginary friend. No, there's something more to that, and help your child embrace it, I think.
Very good. Very good. Tommy, you got any wrap up?
I think that was great advice for parents. Don't be afraid of it. I think that's why a lot of times we shut down these things, that which we don't understand, we fear. So I would suggest just, reach out, find the right people that can guide you through the process and get you the support to figure out where everybody's at, your children and such. And, Angelina's got some great gifts, so don't hesitate to reach out to her and she can help guide you through that process.
Very good. Yeah, we'll link your information, whatever that you would like, onto the website, so people want to reach out and touch base with you if they have questions and so forth. I will say I do know her husband. He is cool, and we have probably participated in a few festive beverages through the years, and so yeah, he's awesome, and I know he's coming around, and so my hat's off to him for allowing you to work with the kids and so on and so forth. But I will say though that do people have abilities? Yeah, and here's how I tell people: almost everybody can drive a car. Even if it's an old grandma who just drives to the grocery store and church, okay, but she can drive a car. But there's some people who can drive in the Daytona 500, okay? That's the difference of psychic abilities. Everybody has it. It's just how much have you practiced it? How much have you supercharged that engine? Are you willing to go to the speed that you need to go? And those Daytona 500 drivers, like your kids and yourself, those are the people we call psychic. But it's because they went to that level that is so much higher than the grandma down here going to the grocery store. And so we classify them as psychic, when in fact it's the same skill sets as the lesser, but they just use it so much more effectively, efficiently, and for the good of others, that we call them psychic, or mediums, or whatever, whatever their gift may be, which are so many. One day we'll do a podcast just on the many, many different gifts that are out there, and we'll classify them for everybody so they get a sense of that. And because a lot of people have them and they don't know how to label them, and I get asked a lot to label things for people so that and that's just how we work in the third density, the third dimension. We need labels, and we like to classify things in numbers and ABC and 1, 2, 3, and that's just how we live, our left brain. So anyway, I will say thank you Thank you a lot for coming on. And I will say to the listeners that when Tom and I go out talking, Angelina is often one of those that's going to be with us speaking and speaking about, children's issues particularly, and how you as a parent can jump in and some, little tricks of the trade. If it's flashcards, if it's special books, she's going to talk about that. And so when we get that opportunity to come to your town, you'll see all three of us, and we'll have a good time doing it. We always do. And so I will sign off on behalf of everybody here, Tom and Angelina and myself, for the Metaphysical Mysteries here at the podcast. We appreciate your time and effort, and hopefully we brought something to you that you couldn't get anywhere else. And we do have many other guests coming with lots of different backgrounds, and so stick with us, and I think you'll find that podcast that fits you just perfect. So from here at the studios, we'll say adios for now, and we'll see you next time.